Caroline Green. Oh, I screwed that up already.
It's good. We're keeping it real.
We'll leave that for the bumper.
That's right. It's awesome.
So Caroline Green. See, you're right.
See? Told
it
you.
messes with your head.
Yeah, it's the een. I think it's the een. Green.
Caroline Green. Caroline Green.
Perfect.
See, I have to say it slowly.
No worries. We got time. We got an hour. You just keep practicing.
Right. Okay, here we go.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom, Vroom, Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Lin Eleoff, thank you so much for being on Vroom, Vroom, Veer, and welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thank you so much. Oh, it's going great, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
All right. So we're already off to a nice start. I think you get my show. I think we're gonna have a good time and be sarcastic and silly and laugh.
Oh, I love sarcasm. It comes.
And to me, that makes a good show.
Yeah.
There you go. So you're familiar with the format here. So we'll talk a little bit about what you've got going on. So you are a lawyer, a coach, and an entrepreneur. Wow.
Yes.
That's like 3 full-time jobs. So
I know,
good
right?
for you, right? And your URL, or one of them, is coveryourassetsonline.com. And
Yes.
that's where you have your do-it-yourself kit. So people don't have to have so many billable hours, right?
Right.
Talk a little bit about it.
Okay, so it's called the Do-It-Yourself Legal Toolkit, and I created it because I never wanted to be one of those fancy schmancy lawyers who sat at a corner office and counted billable hours. But I didn't know how I would translate that into something that would, like what else that would be. And someone once said to me, you just have to figure out another way to be a lawyer. And I was like, what does that mean? How do I do that?
Okay.
And so long story short, I realized that one thing I could do as a lawyer was to create a program so that people didn't have to hire a lawyer. They could save all kinds of money. And so I created this do-it-yourself legal toolkit that allows online entrepreneurs to do so much of the legal legwork themselves so that they don't have to go out and hire a lawyer, at least not right away. There are some things like, registering a trademark.
Right. Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
You're going to need to consult with a lawyer eventually, but especially when you're just starting out and you want to get those legal documents up on your website or a client services agreement, it's all in this toolkit, and it saves a ton of money in legal fees.
Wow. Well, that sounds cool. I like it. And I kind of, there's a couple of attorneys where I work now, so I know what you're talking about. They're on staff, so I don't think they get billable hours anymore. So I think they just have a salary and then they're there. And there's other people that get billable hours.
And they're there.
Right. And they're there. And they're there. They're there. Well, they're doing what they do. I have no clue what they review things and say, no, definitely not. I definitely don't do that. If you want to do that, we have to talk way more.
Right.
How bad do you want to do that? So that's cool. But let's go back in time now and talk about the once upon a time there was a little girl named Lin. So where did you grow up?
I grew up just outside of Toronto, and I'm from Canada. We moved to the States. I'm from New England right now, and we've been here. My husband's job brought us here. We've been here for about 20 years. I absolutely love it here. But yeah, I was a little girl growing up just outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Right. Wow. Okay. So what sort of kid were you?
Okay. So when I was 11 years old.
11. All right.
When I was 11.
Yeah.
And this is true. When I was 11, I don't know what I was watching on television, but I think it was some comedy show or some really cool show. And I wrote to our local television station and asked them if they would hire me so I could be on that show, not understanding how TV shows are made, and it was probably made in Hollywood or who knows what.
Right.
But I asked them if I could be on that show, that I would be a great asset to that show.
When you were 11. Okay.
Yeah, I was 11. And
This is great.
I thought it would be that easy. So,
Sure.
they wrote me back and they said, they were just so gracious and kind, and they encouraged me to pursue it. And they weren't in a position to just put me on that show. But, I'm sure I have that letter somewhere. I should dig that up, because they could have simply not even answered.
Ignored it.
My
Right.
letter,
Right.
or they could have shot me right down. But I just remember that they were very encouraging. And so I eventually went into television in my early 20s. I was a news reporter.
Wow.
And ultimately a news anchor in Toronto.
Wow.
And
So that's a whole nother life.
So that was a whole other life. I know. That was my first career, or my first.
Yeah, that was life number one.
Life number one. That's how that started.
Wow. So now let's back up again to the little girl that got the letter back. Were you just so encouraged that sort of like that became a veer that led you to become the TV anchor? Did you then decide that I'm gonna do broadcast journalism in school and in college and learn how to be a reporter? Talk about how that happened. How did it shape your decisions from that point, from 11 to I got a job and I'm an anchor?
Right. Well, when I first got that letter, I remember it was like in a fancy envelope. It had sort of the logo of the television station that I recognized immediately. And then when I opened the letter, and I was sure there would only be 2 words on the page, "You're hired."
Right. Oh, you're hired. Okay, good.
You're hired, right?
That's right.
So I opened it up, and it was very fancy and official looking. And I thought, and then I read it, and my heart didn't sink at all. It was like, oh, okay, I need to do some more things to sort of get into television. There was this thing about, I'm not sure exactly what television represented, but for me, I'm sure it was like a way that I could express myself and maybe make other people think or laugh or whatever it was back then. I cannot be clear, but I think ultimately what it became for me was a way for me to it was a creative outlet for me. And so journalism seemed to be the way to get into. I wasn't going to be an actress or anything like that. I had no desire to do that. So
Okay.
I applied for a job that was, I don't know, like an hour out of Toronto. It was a radio job. And I decided to they wanted a tape. And so I brought up an audition tape. And as I got there, I got lost, and I ended up at the TV station instead of the radio station, because I just followed the tower. I didn't know where it was, but I saw this great big tower. This is so true.
I believe
and
it.
I thought, okay, I'm here. It's a TV station. This is the wrong place, but I'm going in anyway because I'm here. And I went in
All right.
and I asked for the news director, and they came out and saw me, and they offered me a job on weekends doing the weather.
Wow.
And that's how I got started.
Oh my goodness, that's an amazing story. Jeez.
Isn't it?
You
But
got lost going to a radio station.
I did, but listen to this. So when this news director, and she was amazing, and she said, "Do you think you could do the weather on the weekends?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And then she said, "Come back next week, we'll do an audition, because I think you'll be perfect. You've got the job, but let's just make it official. Let's do the audition." And I did the audition, and I was so horrible. I was so bad.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
And so now she's trying to figure out how to unhire me.
Oops.
Oops, what have I done? And so she said, "I'm going to let you try it again next week, but I want you to really do your homework." And I mean, that was like the best thing, because I went full throttle into understanding everything about TV and meteorology. And in 1 week, you have no idea what I accomplished, Jeff. And
I believe it. Yeah, you watched a lot of TV news
and weather.
and weather, right? Wow.
And
so you learn how to stand and point.
And point to like a green screen.
Right. And how to look over there and like pretend like you can see it. Wow.
And give the web. Yeah. So I did it. And that was that started me down that path. And so I think one thing I do have and I've always had going for me is sort of a boldness to try new things and not worry about what might happen.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about this myself, that it seems like it's like this random sort of, it might be woo-woo, you could say that too, but it could also just be because I have this weirdness too, that what I like to lovingly refer to as awkward public fearlessness.
Ooh, I like that.
And it gets us in trouble sometimes, right? Yep. I don't know if it gets you in trouble, but it gets me in trouble a lot. Where it's almost like I have this sort of like dial on me, right?
Yeah.
And it goes all the way up to 11. And then the next switch is infinity, right? But I have to dial it down for like working in banks or around lawyers and, a lot. Then more like around 2, where, you don't make any jokes and you kind of like tamp everything down, right? Yeah. But that, for me, I don't know what it was like for you, but when I was a kid, and they say that this has something to do with where you were in your family. So I was like the youngest of 3. And there's a bunch of literature about how that kid becomes the attention sort of seeking personality. So what was your family situation like?
I was I have a brother, and I was the oldest of the 2 of us.
Oh, okay.
So
that theory does not fly.
There goes that theory. That was it. I was the oldest, and I was a real. I don't get it, because I think on one hand you might have seen me as a kid, and I wasn't like the loud, boisterous class clown, nothing like that. I was pretty quiet, actually, and I observed a lot. I would ask a lot of questions, so I was very inquisitive. But something was drawing me to that, and I do think it was that sort of fun, creative side, and then also learning. When you're covering the news, you also become, very informed about the world and all of that. So it's just an amazing experience for me.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one big story.
Yeah.
That I bet like not a lot of people know, because now this has got to be interesting, because then in storytelling terms, so once upon a time, there was a girl named Lin. She wrote a letter to a TV station, and then yada, 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 she got a job as a TV anchor.
Exactly.
Period. ... And then... And then
a similar thing happened.
Okay.
Again, like this is, when I look at it, this is a real pattern for me.
Right. No, for sure.
So here's the thing. So we moved to the States. My husband's job took us here, and at the time I was pregnant with my 4th child.
Wow.
And so I left my job in television
as a TV anchor. So that's you're definitely a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal. But
it is a big deal.
Along, I had always wanted to go to law school, but I had this thing going, a great career, so there was never really an opportunity for me to do that. Okay. When we moved to the States, there was a small window of opportunity for me to apply to law school. I didn't have a work visa. I was pregnant and wasn't really thinking about working anyway.
Okay.
And B, there was a law school down the street.
Oh, perfect.
Literally 20 minutes. It's the only law school in Rhode Island. Wow. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting?
Isn't that a little woo-woo convenient?
Isn't that just so convenient?
Right.
And so I said, I'm just going to apply. Why not?
Yeah, sure.
There were all kinds of law schools in the Boston area, as you can imagine. But I thought
that would have been a drive.
That would have been a drive. But I thought, if it's meant to be, if I'm meant to go to law school, then I will get into this law school. And I just kind of left it at that. And I applied and I got in.
Wow.
And then I went to law school and I absolutely loved it. But the weird thing is, as it got closer to graduation and everybody was saying, oh, where, all these firms that they wanted to go to, I had no desire to go work in a big law firm. And that just has never been my thing. And I think the entrepreneur in me was starting to
rise
up.
Right. Yes.
It was like, okay, what do I really want to do? And that's when somebody said to me, you just have to find a different way to be a lawyer. And then the whole life coach thing happened. And then it was the whole, I was veering because of the, what kind of a lawyer wants to go be a life coach, right? So
this is funny because I just talked to another, my last guest that I recorded. She hasn't been on the show yet. Her name's Caroline Green, and she calls herself a recovering lawyer.
Uh-huh. I've heard that. I've heard that term. I don't know that I'm recovering. I think
you're still okay with it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love being a lawyer. I don't think I was ever tainted by.
Right. Well, the thing is she did the grind in the law firm.
Yeah.
That's what she's recovering from.
I know, and I've heard so many lawyers say that, and I thought that's
so somehow you dodged that bullet.
No, I mean I loved law school and just what I learned and how I learned to think and all that. And because I wasn't just coming right out of college going into law school, my experience was entirely different, I think. And that's why I really, really enjoyed it. I earned my way into law school and really had thought about that's what I wanted to do, but realized that I didn't want to come out of law school and do the typical thing, which I tend to not do in my life. And so I became a life coach.
Wow.
A life coach lawyer.
Now, I just let's get it down into the weeds a little.
Okay.
So, how did the when you graduate, you already decided right away that you don't want to go out and work for a law firm, but you are a lawyer, right? So did you set up the cover your assets online first? Or did you do the life? Oh, so you did the life coach thing first.
Okay, so actually, all right. So I did some lawyering first.
Okay.
I knew what I didn't want, right? And that's often what we.
No, that's good. Yeah. And
right. We don't always know what we want, but we know what
you always have more clarity about what you don't want.
Exactly. Yes. I knew I didn't. Yeah, I didn't want to, and I didn't apply at all to any of the big, cool law firms that everyone was wanting to be part of. And friends of mine that were lawyers had started their own firm, and I did some work for them. I did contract work for them. I did that for at two different points, two different law firms. And I really liked it because I was on my own taking cases for them that I wanted to on my schedule. And remember, I had 4 children, so I wasn't ready to give up everything so that I could, work in the legal field. So
right.
So I did do that for a while, and as I was kind of going through life coach training, which I was just doing on the side, and it was just very personal. It wasn't even that I was intending to become a coach necessarily, but it was for my own personal growth and development.
I understand.
But at one point, those two things kind of converged, and it was like, well, what am I going to do as a lawyer, and how can is there a way to even incorporate coaching and being a lawyer and being my own boss, and how can I do this? And I went through maybe 2 years of learning everything about being online, being a coach, what was legally, like where there was a hole in the legal world where entrepreneurs online were kind of lost. There's no such thing technically as internet law. Like it's kind of been put together with all the other areas of law, such as trademark, copyright, contract, all the stuff that makes up intellectual property, which came about with the internet. So I noticed there was a hole there, and I thought, I can really fill that hole, work for myself, serve online entrepreneurs like me. I had by that point learned how to run a business online, and that's when I started Cover Your Assets Online and created the product, and also was coaching online entrepreneurs on starting their own business. So
Wow.
it kind of all came together. And honestly, I thought it never would. I could never have envisioned it.
Yeah, when you think about it, it doesn't really, those pegs don't seem like they're going to fit into one board, right?
Absolutely right. I mean, I thought that I was like searching for something that didn't even exist. And I think in a way, it didn't exist. It's something that I've kind of made up.
Right. No, it's very much a creative endeavor.
Yes, it has been. And that's what's so exciting about it. And what I realized is that I couldn't, like, the three really do fit together. I had to learn to be a coach, an effective coach. That allowed me then to become a business coach, which then allowed me to bring in the lawyer or the legal aspect of everything. So I don't know exactly how I engineered it, but it was.
Well, it is a little woo-woo because it seems like that emotional radar system that we have is really good, like you said before, at telling us no. No, not that, right? That is like comes in super clear. It's like, you never like even need to wonder. I mean, we often like deny that when we get that sort of like intuitive gut feeling of, no, this isn't a good idea. And we just go, damn it, I'm going to persevere to our detriment.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Right. But it's the yeses that are a little bit harder, So I know exactly what you mean. It's like you have to sort of like, it's a little bit tricky, to find a yes that you really, keep moving towards. Right. And you were doing it like 3 times.
Well, exactly. And it's like you want to do it, but the voice in your head is saying, are you sure? That sounds weird. What are people going to say? I don't think that's going to work. All those things that are going on in your mind. And somewhere there's a stronger voice that says, just keep going. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And I think that keeps me going often. It's like when I get stuck, if I trust that I can figure it out. A lot of my clients will say, I don't think I can do this. I'm not smart enough. And I'm like, you just have to be smart enough to be able to figure it out. And then they're like, oh, I can do that.
Right.
So yeah, we just have to be able, and we can figure it out because we're not that 11-year-old little girl anymore, right? We're adults now. We can figure stuff out. I figured out how to get on TV, how to get into law school, how to become an entrepreneur. And I think that's sort of been my mantra. I can figure it out.
My commander when I was in the Air Force complimented me one day. And I'm going to tell it in story mode just because I like the story.
Okay.
So this other woman, she was a supply troopie, and I think we were about the same rank anyway. So we're peers, right? And she just comes up to me and says, hey, there's this thing I've never done before and I don't know how to do it. Can you help me? And I'm like, oh, I've never done that, but yes, and over the course of about 5 minutes, I said, okay, who on the base is the person who you would ask what's going on with this? Oh, I know her, blah, blah, blah. Oh, do you know her number? No. Well, let's look it up. Okay. So we go and we look it up and we call her and then I ask her the question and then I hand her the phone and she goes, blah, 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 blah. And it's done. Right. And so
Right.
I figured that shit out. Right. And it wasn't that hard. Right. And my boss comes out and says, that was pretty awesome. And I go, what, Leanne? And he's like, no, you just demonstrated one of my favorite skills. I'm like, what's that? He's like, FSO. I'm like, FSO?
Yeah.
Figure shit out.
I love it.
Yeah. It's like the only real skill that you need. And the other little bit of a story is whenever you're outside of a situation, you don't have any sort of levers, or you're not engaged. So it looks like all unknowns and you don't understand anything. But when you get in there and start working on stuff, then you can start figuring shit out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that story. That's such a good story, Jeff, because it's absolutely true. And I think it separates our adult mind from what I call our child mind, because I think we are of two minds. We have a child mind and we have an adult mind. And we have to consciously put our adult mind in charge of our adult life, because a child has no business running an adult life. And sometimes we just, allow that default setting of the way we learn to think as a child to kind of run our adult lives. And that's where, when we can remember, wait, I'm an adult now. I can figure this out. And it's very powerful.
Oh, yeah. Like, I learned how to be a news weather lady in a week.
Exactly. In a week.
In a week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So let's drill down and get, because now we have the facts of the case, as they say in trial, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. So you were a little girl. You eventually, I like the 11-year-old story. That was the best. So you go and you become a TV reporter. And how long were you a TV reporter?
10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
And you start off on weather.
Yep.
And where did you move from weather?
Sports.
You were sports?
I did sports.
Okay, so
I did. So I started doing weekend weather, and as I'm doing weekend weather, backing up a bit. Remember, I got lost with the radio tape and ended up at the TV station.
Right.
I eventually found my way to the radio station, and I got that job. So I worked Monday to Friday at a radio station, Saturday, Sunday at the TV station, and eventually at the TV station, I got promoted to weekend sports, which was so fun. And I learned a whole other...
You learned the whole world of sports.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty athletic as a kid and involved, so sports was really interesting to me. And so it wasn't completely out of left field. Right. And then eventually I got a full-time job working for a television station in Toronto, and left radio behind. But I think that's why I love podcasting so much, because I loved radio. It was so fun.
I do. I think they're completely different media, but if I had to choose between the two, I think audio is more my style.
Yeah, because you I don't know, but I'm guessing you have your PJs on.
I do. And, I played with video, and you need such much higher end gear, and you do. I mean, you have to look really good.
Yeah.
And who wants to do that? We're supposed to be, stay at home workers. That's part of the gig of doing any sort of activity online is I want to include the pajama clause in my contract.
Exactly. Very good. I'll write that clause for you. I'll make it airtight.
Thank you. So, okay. So I want to know, when you were doing your TV ladder climbing, were you ever one of those persons that got dispatched with a cameraman in a truck to cover like fire or some sort of, yeah? So walk us through one of those. What was that like? Was it really stressful and crazy?
Well, there were times when it was. And again, it's funny. I knew the stories I didn't like, and eventually found the stories that I did like. But yes, I mean, I covered fires. I covered murders. I was in court covering some really crazy stuff. And I would get caught up in it, emotionally. I hadn't really learned how to sort of detach and sort of be the observer of what was happening. I would throw myself right in there, which is what made me really good at the human stories, the stories about people who had overcome situations, or those kind of stories, those human interest stories that quote unquote real reporters never want to do, because that's not real news. Well, I was really good at those because I could connect with those people, and eventually I ended up doing some sort of reporting that was like for a week long. We could call it investigation stuff, but it was really rewarding work. And I won a couple of awards covering those human interest stories, if you can believe it. And it was wonderful. And so I think that woo-woo part of me was there, and I was aware of it, but barely. I just knew that that's what I didn't want, and then what I did want. And
Right.
so those stories always resonated with me.
Yeah, do you know who Alex Bloomberg is?
I know that name.
He is, he used to be a producer on This American Life on NPR.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And now he runs this company called Gimlet Studios, I think. So he's transitioned to make money doing podcasting. But I took a class with him, and not with him personally, but he did a creative live class. That's where they just record him talking for like a week or a day, or I don't know how long it lasts, but it comes out to be a whole video, hours and hours of video that you get to listen to / watch. And it was so amazing to get into the art and the power of storytelling. And you got a little bit of that, where I was like saying like, once upon a time there was Lin, and then there's all these little elements about telling a story that I was totally clueless about, that I'm trying to integrate into my show now. So maybe you can share like some of the story behind the story of some of those human interest things, and where those woo factors came in, where they just like really honest emotional things going on.
One of the stories, and this is one that I actually unexpectedly won an award for. It was a 4-part series, and I called it About Face. And there was a hospital in Toronto called the Hospital for Sick Children. And there's a doctor there whose specialty was to help children who had facial deformities. So, I can't remember now how I sort of chose that, but I know I was so drawn to it. And there weren't just children. There were a couple of adults that I talked to throughout this series. But it was all about, what it means to have a face that is relatively normal versus a face that is not,
Right.
And when I say that, of course, with a normal face, we know what that means. Like your eyes and your nose and your mouth are exactly where they're supposed to be.
Right.
And so I did these stories of people. One woman who had gone through so many surgeries and yet had used her struggle and had gone on to do some incredible things with her life, and started this whole community and support group for people who had facial deformities and had to, in various degrees, had to manage their lives because nothing was ever going to be completely normal. That story, and that series of stories, there were children who had serious cleft palates and things like that. And those stories really moved me. And, my fellow reporters would always say to me, you just have to you have to toughen up. You need a thicker skin. And I never believed that. And so those stories moved me. And I think that came through in my reporting. And I was just so grateful and honored to have had the opportunity to meet with the doctors, to talk to the people who were patients and the parents of these children who, it was just incredible. And to this day.
It sounds like, there's a struggle there, right? And, without being judgy, there isn't a way, you want to look as, like you said, normal as possible, right? That I can see all kinds of fascinating, interesting angles with storytelling in that situation. So yeah, that whole thing about ambulance chasing and if it bleeds, it leads. That's the wrong kind of news anyway, right? I like the formula that Alex uses is, this is a story about X and it's interesting because of Y. And you've got a lot of Y's in that story.
Yeah, there's the underlying message of what it means to go through a struggle, to overcome that struggle.
Right.
The residual struggle, because it doesn't
go away. No.
Right, but that you can come through something like that and truly be stronger and bigger and have a bigger purpose. I just love that. These days I call that an AFGO, another freaking growth opportunity. So it's like, it doesn't matter what it is and why we're here. We all have those AFGOs, and if we ignore them because the universe sends them to bonk us over the head, and we do ignore them. I think you call them a tap on the shoulder, or
yeah. One of those taps from the universe.
A tap from the universe, and if we don't pay attention, eventually it really whacks us over the head.
Right.
We either learn the lesson or we don't.
They start as a tap, and they get increasingly more forceful until they're 2x4 across the face.
And you're bawling on the bathroom floor saying, "What am I supposed to do?" Yeah.
Yeah. Well, say the thing again. It was another freaking growth opportunity. AFGO. Okay. AFGO. I love that. Another freaking growth opportunity. AFGO. I'm gonna put that in the data bank. But yeah, they come up all sorts of let's talk a little bit about some of your AFGOs, because I'm sure you've had plenty, and let's talk about one that maybe was a 2x4 to the face.
Well,
maybe one that you ignored for a while. Yeah,
I think probably my first really big 2x4 to the face was the one that sent me reeling to my knees, was when my first marriage didn't last, and so I went through a divorce, and I just remember, I can remember thinking, I can't imagine being on the other side of this, and realizing I had to go through it, and not really understanding anything about AFGOs then. But I came upon a book by Harriet Lerner, The Dance of Anger and The Dance of Intimacy. Those two books I remember reading as I was going through that, and I thought, oh, this is supposed to be teaching me something about me, that yes, I was going through a divorce, but it was more than that. It was bigger than that. I was supposed to learn something big from that. And I did. I got a lot out of that divorce, I'll tell you.
Right.
And it was, and so that was big. And I think that's where I got back up, and I got back up first to my, I was just barely standing, and then I was standing nice and tall, shoulders back, head up, and learned from, I don't even call them mistakes, Jeff. I learned from the experience. I don't think there were any mistakes in that. And
no,
it had to happen, and there were wonderful things that came out of it. But the best thing, I think, is that what I learned about myself. And that was incredibly worth it.
So were there sort of like hints before the 2x4? Like little gentle taps you were ignoring? You were like, meh.
Oh, I think so. I decided after 2 years that I needed to be out of the marriage, that it wasn't going to.
It wasn't going to work.
It wasn't going to work, and it wasn't going to serve me to stay. Although, who knows? Maybe if I stayed, it would have been worked out a different way. But one way or the other, I was determined not to settle for the status quo, and so I probably had taps, but it didn't take, I didn't want to stay and wait for something to happen that would be, that would make everything all right. I needed to make it all right. And so I was the one who decided this is what I need to do to make it right for me right now, because there's no guarantee anything's going to happen that's going to fix it.
Right.
So I think there were probably a few taps, but I don't even know that it had to be a slug across the head.
Maybe you listened to one of the taps.
I think I listened to the taps, but ultimately, it hurts. It
is. It's really rough. Because that whenever you talk about ending a relationship like that, you are like reordering your entire life. So
yes.
it's not, even if you have to do it, it's just like such a gigantic pill to swallow.
Exactly. So there was no doubt in my mind that I had to do it.
It doesn't make it easier.
But it did make it easier. No, it did not.
No,
anyway.
I get it. No, but you survived, and anything you survive
Absolutely.
makes you stronger. So are you still working on your Lin Eleoff.com, your coaching site?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Talk a little bit about that.
That's more about the coaching, and I do some personal coaching as well as business coaching, because, like I always say, starting a business is an AFCO of epic proportions, right? So you start a business online, and that's where all that stuff comes out, all your insecurities, the self-doubt, everything. So as a business coach, I also coach people through that, because, I'm sure you understand too. It's like, oh, this is such a great idea. Why did I decide to do this? So the lineleoff.com is really about coaching, self-coaching, personal coaching, business coaching, and then the coveryourassetsonline.com is just all the legal stuff. That's like the practical stuff you need to do to protect your business.
Yeah, and I saw a really good example somewhere in your stuff. I don't know if it was your one sheet or your site, but you talked about an example of you get an email from somebody saying you've used a copyrighted image on your website, and you need to give us $5,000 right now, or else we're going to sue you for $1 million or something like that. It's essentially how it comes out. And that actually didn't happen to me, but a friend of mine emailed me that she forwarded the email to me, saying, what do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I spent like a couple hours researching, and I figured out that it was a scam. But still, we had, she probably freaked out about it for like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary. First of all, sometimes it's a scam, but not always. Like there are online entrepreneurs who think that, if it's on Google, then I'm free to use it. If we're just talking about images, and that
that'll get you in trouble.
And so there are copyright, trademark considerations that people don't know. They don't know what they don't know, and that's why I felt like if I created this toolkit, I could put everything in there that they need to know, and then they can take action from there. So with regards to something like those images, I've heard those stories everywhere. I hear them all the time, or I have someone like you telling me that they know somebody that it happened to.
Right. So
there is a way to handle that, but a lot of people were just paying.
I know, right?
And not doing any. Yeah. So that's
and and I get it too. I understand why they paid.
Yeah.
Too, because they're like, I don't want to deal with this. It's not that much money. I'm just going to pay them. And I'm like, that's extortion.
Well, not only that is like, how do you know that that's just not somebody saying, hey, I saw you use that image and you're not supposed to, so pay me some money, and they aren't the rightful owner of the image either.
Right. No, totally. And that's when I learned, like, there's telltale signs of scam. And then there's like you said, they might be legit. But if they're legit, that you can tell.
You can tell, or at least you can investigate and find out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a blast. Wait a minute. Did we leave anything out? Do we have to hit anything? Do we need to say your URL again? Coveryourassets.com.
Jeff?
Coveryourassetsonline.com. Right? Did I get it right?
There you go.
And then
Yep.
the coaching site is Lin Eleoff. And I got the name right, I think.
You did.
Yay.
You got it.
I kept thinking Eleoff for the last week or so. So Eleoff. And that's where you can find out more about the coaching stuff, the business/personal coaching. So this has been a blast. I'm glad we're finally able to lock this down. Time zones be damned.
Jeff, you are so fun to talk to. You ask such great questions, and you really got me thinking about, that letter when I was 11. I hadn't thought about that for a while. So this was fun. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad. I had a blast too. I'm glad we were finally able to nail it down.
Agree.
All right. You have a good one. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.